Afternoon. Hello, everybody. We've got to get started. So today I'm going to do a bit of talking, and then I'm going to do a question and answer session, most probably individually, so I can come around and talk to you if you've got any particular questions about the assessments. And then based on what we talk about, I might do some more talking to the class, because often you have common problems and it makes sense to report back to the class in that context. Before we begin, announcement time. So it's still ongoing, the industrial dispute. Have you heard about the marking boycott? Right. It's been proposed that if some progress is not made, that industrial action is going to include a boycott of marking. So if you were to submit your work, then I wouldn't mark it. The motivation behind that is to cause you discomfort and unpleasantness, which then you are meant to transmit to the management, who then are meant to do what we want. The trouble is, in the context of this module, is that in particular the first assessment and to a certain extent the second assessment are scheduled in such a way that you get the feedback whilst you're actually still on the course. It's not the case that you do the course, you do some exam, and then you have to wait another couple of weeks in order to get your mark back. And in that additional couple of weeks, you are feeling a bit nervous, and it just extends the period in which you are feeling, you don't like that period where you don't know. If there was to be any delay in you getting your feedback on assessments 1 or 2, then it would impact the rest of the course, and that would mean we'd have to change. Well, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure what it would mean. So if there is some vote for a marking boycott, I'm not going to go along with it. I'm going to mark your work as quickly as I can. So whenever you turn in the first assessment, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. I'll endeavour to get it back in about a week. We'll see. But I want to try and turn it around as quickly as possible, because then you can use the feedback from the first assessment as you work towards your second assessment, which I'll talk about next week in more detail. Okay, so that's the industrial action thing, announcement out of the way. As there are further developments, I will let you know. There's another announcement. That's me. I'm giving a talk tomorrow as part of a seminar series. You might be interested in coming to this. It's at 4 o'clock in the Mountbatten building, because I'm talking about an aspect of my research which is related to bits of the course. How can you look at the Earth as a kind of dynamical system, or in a systems dynamics context? There's no maths. There are some figures and wiggly lines, but it's meant to be for a general audience. So if you want to come along to that, please do. And there are free tea, coffee, and very good muffins after the talk, which is the only reason I'm going. So we had our first quiz based on our lecture material. I think there might be at least one group sigil missing here. Apologies if that is the case. But anyway, I've tallied up the marks. Next week I'll start producing the league table, but the headline result at the moment is that House Sauria are streaking into the lead already. Somebody obviously watched the guest lecture video, and they did a very good job at answering all the questions. All I will say is that some groups maybe didn't do such a good job, so hopefully next week, or actually by Friday, because I'm going to set the next guest lecture video, everybody will be up to scratch. Right. So assessments. Assessment 1, which is why you're all here today, I would imagine. Now the deadline for this is 5 p.m. this Friday. Okay? Now, the number of times I've been asked for an extension is too damn high. I appreciate that people will always want extra time. Doesn't matter if you say it's on Monday, they want to hand it on Tuesday. If it's Tuesday, they want to hand it on Wednesday. People will always want an extension for various reasons, and they are varied. However, it has come to my attention that there might be some deadlines operating this week. So, whilst I can't grant any individual extension, if you want to get an extension because of special circumstances, then you need to talk to your tutor and go through the school. However, I am proposing that we move the deadline to Monday, right? So that will give you the weekend. So if you've got anything to submit on this Friday, then the deadline would be Monday, 5 p.m. on the 3rd. Right. Before I put this to the vote, because this is a functioning democracy, just like the Ukraine, before I put this to the vote, the reason I didn't want to have a submission deadline on that day is because I'm pretty much busy all day. I'm running a workshop. So if anybody's got any last minute questions up until 5 o'clock, I'm most probably not going to have any access to my email. That might not be a problem, but if you were thinking of working all the way over the weekend and then you've got some burning issue on Monday morning, I might not be able to get back to you in time before 5 p.m. Okay, but anyway, who would like the deadline moved from this Friday to Monday the 3rd? If you just put your hand up. Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, I'd say that's 25. Who wouldn't? Come on, one person's got to put their hand up. And who obviously is ambivalent? Hopefully that will be the balance of how many people in the room minus 25. Okay, so I think the motion has been passed. We're going to move the deadline to Monday. I will send an email out immediately after this lecture to let everybody know. Thus far, no one has submitted anything. There's been a couple of test submissions, but I don't think we're in a situation where anyone's going to be penalised because they've actually submitted something already. So moving it to Monday, I think is going to be fine. This is the first assessment. The report template, the final report template that I would like you to use is on the website in the assessments page. Has everybody seen this? Has everybody got access to it? Has anybody had any problems looking at it or downloading it? Does using Word represent a problem for anybody? I'd hope not, okay. And importantly, for this first assessment, you do not have to give citations or references. You are told a lot, especially in your first year, to cite everything and provide literature that will support your arguments. I don't need it for this first assessment because I know exactly the kind of material that you should be basing the answers on. It's the reading from Thinking in Systems, basically it's the first 2, or maybe it's the first 3 sections in Thinking in Systems, and it's some of the in-class material from lectures 1 to 3. The motivation on this assessment is to get you up to speed on this thing called systems dynamics. So some of the ideas, understanding some of the concepts, being able to draw some systems dynamics diagrams. And so, because I'm pretty sure I know where you're getting the literature or the information from, you don't need to cite anything. I just need you to reproduce the answers that demonstrate you have a good understanding. Right, so that's the first assessment. I've had some questions about it. And what I wanted to do, before I go around the room and start talking to individuals or groups, just recap a few things that you might find useful. So, this thing. One of the challenge of real-world systems, a central element in the global challenges, is that the systems, either inherently or the way they interact, are not linear. Okay? So this portion down here, this line here, as you increase the phosphorus input into the lake, and as the phosphorus concentration changes in the lake, there is a region where there's a nice smooth straight line relationship. There's a nice smooth linear relationship. But because of the dynamics of the system, there comes a point which we denote here as fold 1, that a very small increase means a very large increase in the amount of phosphorus concentration in the lake. If you were to then decrease the phosphorus going into the lake, again you're stuck on this kind of linear regime, but at this higher level, okay? And then at fold 2, a relatively small decrease in the phosphorus input rate could lead to a sudden and large decrease in the amount of phosphorus in the water. So what that system describes is a kind of a loop, which we talk in terms of like a hysteresis loop. So it's a nonlinear system. It's a system that's so nonlinear, it's actually bistable. There's a region where it can either be in this state or this state. And what determines what state it is in is its prior history. So that's kind of one way you can try to remember that it's got history in it, or hysteresis, even though that's not really the root. Okay. So that is a classic bistable system that exhibits hysteresis. Okay. Question 6. I have a lot of questions about question 6. Question 6 feels a bit ambiguous, but if you just read the book, Thinking in Systems, and you take and use those examples, and you structure your systems diagram on the kind of diagrams you see in the book, then you will get all the marks, basically. The thing about systems dynamics diagrams is they can be very complicated. Here's one. This is the mess in Afghanistan in terms of the counterinsurgency. So this was used by, and is used by, for example, the US military, but many military organizations all over the world use systems dynamics diagrams like this, as well as commercial entities, educational institutions. They're in use all over the place. The reason I wanted to show you this is just to show that it's a bit complicated. It's really quite inscrutable, but the points are that you can see there are certain elements here. There are kind of stocks, and there are flows between these stocks, and these flows and the stocks themselves are acted or operated upon by other things. Now, in terms of counterinsurgency in Afghanistan, the other things are myriad, and there are lots and lots of complicated links. In the context of assessment 1, the system dynamics diagram question, we're obviously looking for something a bit more simpler, so I introduced the notion of system dynamics with the idea of stocks and sources and sinks and flows. And if you were to look in thinking in systems, you see these systems represented like this. So you often have a stock here, and then you'll have a flow, which for some reason they kind of denote not with little cartoony taps, but often with these kind of inverted triangle symbols. And there's a flow of something into this stock. Where it comes from, I guess, is denoted by this cloud. It just comes from somewhere. We're not particularly interested where it comes from. We just know there is a flow into that stock. You can get a bit more detail, so you can say, look, there's a stock here, and there's some kind of source, which is, in a sense, another kind of stock. And the important interactions, not the exclusively important interactions, but what often happens of interest is when you have some kind of flow here, but then the flow is being operated or being affected on by some other stock. So it's not just the sort of the material moving around, whether it's information or carbon atoms or bits in the internet. There's also a kind of causal or information flows. Something is affecting something else, and sometimes that thing comes back and affects other things, so you produce a loop. So you produce these kind of feedback loops. So I was talking about initially in the terms of population change, and so there are increasing processes, there are decreasing processes, and the stock itself will very often have an effect on the rate of decrease as well as the rate of increase. And when you link up population stock to other processes, then the situation can get quite complicated. Initially I thought, well, we could visualize it like this, and then we began to talk in class about how all the other individual global challenges can be affecting the other global challenges and how it can be mediated by carbon dioxide and how humans are changing carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere. So obviously you could, if you really wanted to, spend the rest of your life annotating a systems dynamics diagram of how humans are affecting the carbon cycle, because you could just go on forever at smaller and smaller temporal spatial scales. There are 5 marks available for this particular question, so use that to gauge how much effort you need. But if nothing else, have a look in the textbook and try and base your diagrams on those kind of system diagrams, and you won't go very wrong, okay? But we can talk about that later in class as well. The other thing I want to talk about in terms of assessment, it's not assessment 1, but it's later, assessments 3 and 4. I need to have your group project ideas. I think, I haven't checked to be honest, there are some groups that are outstanding in giving me their ideas. I'm not sure, I need to check. If you haven't, as a group, decided, just like a thumbnail sketch of what you want to do for your poster and your group presentation, then please do have a think about that and get back to me before the end of this week. It is some time before we do the group presentations and posters, but you're going to be needing to start work on it quite seriously soon. And also, if you are not in a group, then please do talk to me now. I think there is at least one person that I need to sort out being in a group, but then when I look at the number of people enrolled on the course and the number of people who actually within a group, the 2 numbers are not equal. One is larger than the other. So there are some people registered on the course that aren't in a group, which does worry me a bit. If that is the case, for whatever reason, then talk to me now. But then hopefully by the end of this week, we can get it sorted. And the last thing I want to point out before we start discussing the assessments in any detail is that the reading for this Friday is a paper by Ehrlich and Ehrlich. Paul Ehrlich wrote the population bomb in the 1960s. Any demographers, human geography, you would have heard all about Ehrlich, I guess. He's a sort of the Malthusian fire and brimstone end of the